Welcome back to Around the SEC, the show where everything just means more. I'm Micah Farmer.
And I'm Mia Roy.
And as you can see, just like Kentucky's football team, I am completely cooked right now. Had a rough week in the sun, but we are ready to get going. Great week 2 of SEC football. A lot of good games, some really weird results in the conference this week, some disappointments, but let's start off with the teams that did well, namely the Texas Longhorns and the Tennessee Volunteers. And let's start with Texas because they look like one of the best teams in the country right now after beating Michigan 31-12. What did you see from them in that game?
I was fascinated by Texas. I did not expect them to come out that hot. I was impressed by their 400 yards of offense, averaging 5.7 yards a play. I just thought that was really impressive coming up against Michigan, the reigning national champions.
Yeah, I completely agree. You look at this Texas offense, and we know how good it looks on paper, but obviously the questions of with C.J. Baxter out for the year, how's the run game going to be? And they still were able to put up 143 rushing yards on a defensive line that still is one of the best in college football. The talent, Michigan lost a lot of talent, but it definitely wasn't on the defensive line. So I'm really impressed with Texas. I think Texas is one of the best 3 teams in the country right now, along with Georgia and Ohio State, and they could definitely make a run at not only the SEC championship, but the national championship right now.
I totally agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. Then the next team we're going to talk about that also did really well is Tennessee, and I thought Tennessee was going to win this game. I didn't think they were going to win it by this margin, 51-10. How about that?
I mean, that is a score to put up. That is impressive. I think Brown is one of my favorite players. I mean, he had 20 carries and 2 touchdowns. That's as much as you can ask for from a running back.
Yeah, he definitely was good. Dylan Sampson running the ball for Tennessee also looked very good. And how about Nico Iamaleava for Tennessee? Continues to just put up numbers early in the season. Did have a couple picks. One was to a guy that's all ACC and Aiden White for the Wolfpack, who did return it. I think you can excuse the one to Aiden White because of how good of a corner he is. But still, I really liked what I saw from Nico in this week. And Tennessee's defense has looked incredible so far. I know it's Chattanooga and NC State, but they've looked really, really good, allowing just 39 rushing yards.
Yeah, and only 143 total yards. That is good.
Yeah, definitely. But it wasn't all amazing for the SEC this past weekend. And let's start with Arkansas, as this is a team that a couple people picked for an upset. I thought Oklahoma State was going to win this game pretty handily. Honestly, I'm still not sure what I think about this Oklahoma State team, and I'm still not sure what I think about this Arkansas team. This is a very weird game. Taylon Green, I will say, looks much improved from his time at Boise State last year, and I know you're an Arkansas fan.
I am.
So what did you see from this game?
We had the line, the Heartbreak Hogs, and I have to say the Heartbreak Hogs struck again. I was watching it in Jordan Hare and on the billboard or on the Jumbotron, and they broke our hearts once again. I just think they cannot close a game. I think that is the number one issue with this team. They'll get ahead and they blow it every time, and I think that's been a reoccurring theme under Sam Pittman if we're looking at the past few years.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's starting to really be a big question with Pittman if he is able to ever really finish out a big game, because you look at an opportunity like this for an Arkansas team that was kind of on the up but then really fell back down to earth last year. This is a huge opportunity to take down a top 25 team, and you can't waste a game like this from Jaquindon Jackson, putting up almost 150 on the ground. Arkansas's got to be better. That fourth quarter, it looked like neither team wanted to win the game with all the turnovers and the missed passes, missed plays. So Arkansas's got to figure it out, but I think there is potential in this team for sure. I still really like the upside of Isaiah Satenia at receiver. Andrew Armstrong is already incredible out there, and if you keep getting this version of Taylon Green rather than the Boise State version of Taylon Green, I think Arkansas could surprise some people this year.
I will agree. I think one room for improvement is the special teams. I mean, 2 missed field goals and a fumbled punt, you cannot win a close game with that.
No.
There's no hope when you do that.
Especially on the road. That's going to be very difficult.
Yes.
But we just talked about a team going on the road. How about the other Oklahoma team, not Oklahoma State, the SEC Oklahoma team in the Sooners, and they really struggled at home this weekend, barely squeaking out a win versus Houston, and a little bit nervous for Oklahoma now after that game.
Yeah, I did not expect that. I think they overlooked Houston. I think they underestimated them not being a traditional good football team, and I don't know, you can't do that.
No, you definitely can't. Jackson Arnold is a quarterback that I'm still not totally sold on. I think he has potential for sure, but I want to see more from him. But I think I completely agree. Overlooking Houston, you get Tulane next week, or this week now, who's a very solid team, then Tennessee the week after. So with that on the schedule and a team like Houston who came in very low regarded, I think they definitely overlooked the Cougars, and I think it came back to bite them really. They're lucky they did not lose that game.
No, I would have been interested to see if Houston caught that 2-point conversion to tie it up in the third quarter. That would have been an interesting sway in the game to see how that would have turned out for Oklahoma. I don't think it would have gone their way.
I actually completely agree with you. I think if they get that conversion, Houston wins that game. But Oklahoma, with just enough luck to pull it out. I feel like we've seen this a lot from the Sooners the last couple years. They get 1 or 2 weird home games a year where they're just barely able to squeak it out, and we saw it again. But let's move on now to our winner and loser of the week. This isn't necessarily who we think is the best in the conference or worst in the conference as a whole, but who we think had the best week and the worst week of teams in the SEC. So let's start with our winners. Who is your winner of the week, Mia?
My winner is Texas, I have to say. I mean, 400 yards of offense, and they converted 10 out of 16 third downs. I just think that is a really impressive stat, and quarterback Quinn Ewers was great. 246 yards, 3 touchdowns. I just was really impressed by this Texas team.
I completely agree. We talked about Texas a lot and how much we've been impressed by them, but my winner of the week is the real UT. Tennessee fans will love that. The real orange UT in the SEC, the Tennessee Volunteers. You beat what was then a top 25 team by 41 points in their home state. That game was in Charlotte. Raleigh is also in North Carolina. So to go into more of their territory and win the game by that much, I was very impressed. Multiple facets of the offense working with Dylan Sampson, Nico Iamaleava, and we talked about the defense. So for me, it is going to be the Tennessee Volunteers. But let's flip this over now. Who is your loser of the week? And I don't want to talk about it.
I have to say the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 turnovers opposed to Cal's 0.
Yeah.
I just think we all expected more coming off of that 70-point win, and that was just a very disappointing performance all the way around.
Yeah, Auburn came into that game as a 2-touchdown favorite, and Cal quarterback Fernando Mendoza could not throw an incomplete pass the first half. He completed over 90% of his passes in the first half, which is just something you don't see. And it wasn't all dink and dunk passes either. He was throwing over the middle, and Auburn's defense just couldn't do anything about it. Peyton Thorne really struggling to read defenses, and part of it was I don't think he had any time either. The offensive line struggled, especially with blitz pickup. It seemed like every time Cal brought someone extra, the offensive line was lost. Thorne was on the run, and then a lot of times that ended in an interception. So let's see if Auburn can regroup, get New Mexico this weekend. Didn't go so well with the last New Mexico team, but hopefully different outcome for the Tigers this weekend.
I think there's hope for this weekend. Let's hope it was a wake-up call.
Let's hope for sure, because otherwise they're in for a rough season. But my loser of the week is the Kentucky Wildcats. I mentioned them at the very start of the show in jest, but they lost 31-6 at home to South Carolina. That is just inexcusable.
Yeah.
South Carolina is not a very good team. I think Kentucky might finish last in the conference this year. We'll get to that in a little bit. But when your starting QB goes 3 of 10 for 30 yards, is this 1925? What is Kentucky doing on offense? And it's not like they had a run game either. Only 139 rush yards in total. And when you have 44 pass yards, just not enough. But how about Dylan Stewart off the edge for South Carolina? The true freshman looked incredible. Ended up being the highest graded player or highest graded freshman by PFF this weekend. Fun fact there. So Dylan Stewart's going to be scary. Game days in South Carolina this weekend for LSU coming to town. We'll pick that game here in a little bit. But yeah, rough week for Kentucky. So they are my loser of the week. Now let's get into our week 2 overreactions. Still early enough in the season to where I feel like people can be jumping to conclusions. So we're going to evaluate some of those, see what we think. And our first one is, will Kentucky finish last in the SEC?
Yes.
I agree.
I do not think this is an overreaction. I think Kentucky's only chance of not finishing last is if Vanderbilt finishes last.
I think it's Mississippi State.
Oh, interesting.
I like Vanderbilt with Diego Pavia under center this year. I actually like the Vanderbilt team a good bit. Mississippi State just got murdered by Arizona State this past weekend. They were honestly a contender for loser of the week for me as well, but it's the fact that it was out of conference that kept them out of that. Just I think it's going to be a race to the bottom between Kentucky and Mississippi State, but I think Kentucky wins that race. I think Kentucky finishes last. They are not looking good right now.
I don't think there's hope for them.
Honorable mention to Florida as well. They could also be down there with the way that schedule is. But our next overreaction is Florida should start DJ Lagway the rest of the season. What do you think?
I do not agree at all. I think with senior Graham Mertz out with a concussion, and my main issue with them starting DJ Lagway is they were playing Samford. There was no true test to the team he was playing. I mean, Samford, their defense wasn't strong. He did have an impressive 18 for 25, a total of 466 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was impressive, but I just don't think you can write Mertz off just yet.
I completely agree, and I'm so glad you said that because I didn't want it to be me as the Florida fan trying to justify this, but Graham Mertz was incredible last season for the Gators. Because of one bad game versus a very good Miami team, why are you trying to write him off already? This is a very solid quarterback. Don't get me wrong. DJ Lagway, I think, did things that purely from an athleticism standpoint, very few players can do. His one-legged step up in the pocket throw to Aiden Mazzell in the touchdown, that was a play that regardless of the defense, not many quarterbacks in the country can make. But at the end of the day, you're right. It is a Samford FCS defense. So I think that if you start Lagway right now versus the defenses you're about to go up against, I don't think that ends well for you at all. I think you don't want to stunt his growth early by any means. Keep Mertz in there. Just be sensible about it and see what happens. Although I still think either way you go about 4-8 this year. Then our final overreaction is that Tennessee's Nico Iamaleava is a Heisman contender. What do you think?
I agree with that being an overreaction. I have to say, I think people love to jump to the Heisman contender whenever they have a good game, but he had 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions. I'm concerned about that. I don't believe a Heisman contender throws 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in a game.
Well, this is very boring, but we all agree. We agree once again. Not great for the debate concept, but still, I think these are all pretty fair reactions to what we've agreed on here. I don't think Iamaleava is a Heisman contender either, purely because there are too many top-flight players ahead of him. Carson Beck from Georgia, Quinn Ewers from Texas, Ashton Genty for Boise State, the running back, who's basically averaging 200 yards a game right now, one of those coming against Oregon. So I don't think you can discount any of those guys. Brady Cook as well, the Missouri quarterback, even Luther Burden. Jackson Dart as well. There are so many very good players ahead of Iamaleava at this point. I just think you can't put him there. No. But I definitely think he's one in the future, either next year or the year after.
Oh, with time, I think he will for sure develop, possibly into a Heisman contender for sure. But
we'll have to see.
Yet.
A lot of hope for him in Rocky Top for sure, though. But now let's move on to our Week 3 picks. Currently, I am 4-5. The guests are also 4-5. I pulled it back a little bit last week. Thanks, Jaden. But let's start off with College Game Day. Number 16, LSU, heading down to Columbia to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Who do you have in that one?
I'm taking LSU. I have to say, after that loss against USC, I just hope they have a chip on their shoulder this weekend and they come out and they prove themselves.
I agree. I'm taking LSU as well. They did struggle with Nicholls State a little bit, but South Carolina, I just think people are overreacting to the Kentucky game. I think it's more Kentucky being terrible than South Carolina being amazing. Although I do think this game is close for the first half. I think this game is very close. Game day, obviously the environment's going to be rocking. Willie B is going to be going crazy down there. It's a great game day environment, honestly, if you haven't been. But LSU, I think at the end of the day, the talent gap with Garrett Nussmeier, Kyron Lacey, the 2 tackles, and Will Campbell and Emory Jones Jr. on the offensive line, I think they can neutralize Dylan Stewart a little bit. So I'm taking the Tigers as well. Our next game is number 4, Alabama, traveling up north to take on Wisconsin. Who do you have in the battle of the red teams there?
I have Alabama. I'm hesitant on Alabama, but I think I'm taking them. I think I have faith in Jalen Milroe. I'm interested to see how this Alabama team plays out with without Nick Saban in the mix.
Yeah, I completely agree. They've looked kind of iffy so far, struggled with USF for the first 3 quarters before really pulling away, but Wisconsin does not look good. They've struggled to beat Western Michigan. They've struggled to beat FCS South Dakota, both at home. Even though South Dakota is an elite FCS team, they're still an FCS team. You have to be able to beat teams like that, and I think Alabama just has too much talent at the end of the day. I don't think Wisconsin has a corner that can cover Ryan Williams either. So I expect him to have a big day up there in Wisconsin. Our next game is one of a ranked matchup that I don't think anyone expected to be a ranked matchup coming into the season. How about number 24 Boston College and the Fighting Eagles going to Columbia, Missouri to take on the Missouri Tigers?
Boston College came out of nowhere for me. I think that is just a unique situation to see them ranked, but I have to take Mizzou. I just think they have more experience. I think they're more a traditional football school. It's at Mizzou. We've seen that atmosphere. We've seen, when they rush the field after wins. I just think that Boston College coming down south to Mizzou, they're not going to be able to face that matchup.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Missouri defense is much better than the Florida State defense, and this is a Missouri team that I've picked to win the SEC, so I would hope I'm backing them versus Boston College. The Brady Cook-Luther Burden duo, we know what the deal with that is. Nate Noel has been great, the App State transfer running back for them so far, and I think Johnny Walker off the edge is going to be giving quarterback Thomas Castellanos fits for Boston College, and Boston College won't be able to run the ball in Missouri the same way they did against Florida State. So give me Missouri, give me the home environment there as well. Then our next one is Tulane at Oklahoma. Who are you going with for that one?
I'm taking Oklahoma. We saw Tulane lose to Kansas State. I was not impressed by that game, and I think Oklahoma's not going to overlook Tulane like they did Houston. I think they learned their lesson, and I think they're going to come out with a fire, and if they don't, then I would be very concerned.
Well, I have Oklahoma here on the sheet, but I'm changing it. I'm going Tulane. Roll wave, baby. I was actually impressed by the Tulane game versus Kansas State, a Kansas State team that I think is a top 20 team in the country, and they almost beat them. Even though that game was in Tulane, I think Oklahoma will actually be looking forward to Tennessee a little bit and trying to prepare for that Tennessee team after what you saw them do versus NC State. And I'm a little bit worried about whether Oklahoma has anyone on the outside that can cover Mario Edwards out for Tulane, because he is such an incredible receiver out on the outside, made some circus catches versus Kansas State, and we've seen Oklahoma have trouble in these early season home games, whether it be Tulane a couple years ago or Army a few years ago even, that almost knocked off the Sooners. So that's my upset pick for the week. I am going with Tulane. Then our final pick is the Texas A&M Aggies going into the Swamp to take on the Florida Gators and one of the two quarterbacks. It'll probably be Graham Mertz, but we'll see what happens. So who do you have in that one?
I'm taking Texas A&M. I think with Florida's uncertainty on the quarterback, I'm sure it will be Mertz, but him coming off of a concussion, I just wonder if that's going to have him shaken up a little. I'm always underwhelmed by Texas A&M. I will say that. But, they lost to Notre Dame, but I think they held with them until the end of the fourth quarter. And while it did end in a loss, I think it was almost a moral victory for them. So I'm interested to see how this game plays out. But in the end, I'm taking Texas A&M.
Yeah, I originally was picking with my heart here. I was leaning Florida, but the talent gap on defense is too big. The Texas A&M defense is just so good. We saw it versus Notre Dame. Even though the offense couldn't get anything going, the defense played very well. And now the Texas A&M offense is not playing against the best secondary in the country. They're playing against one of the worst secondaries in the SEC outside of safety Jordan Castell, who is quite good. But the rest of this Florida defense, I'm very worried about. I think Connor Weigman will have a bounce-back game this week, and I think Billy Napier's gone in about 3 or 4 weeks, and I think this is one of the first steps to that happening. So give me Texas A&M as well.
All right.
But that is all we have for you guys this week. I'm Micah Farmer.
And I'm Mia Roy.
And join us next week again on Around the SEC.